we are already straight into your PowerPoint.
Yes, I put the screen sharing on. I can stop the share and then talk for a little bit.
No, it's fine. It's very good. No, it's good.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, we're good. We're live on YouTube, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. And do we have people there? Aishwarya?
So we're live on YouTube, and
Do we have people there? Do we have people there?
Yes, there are two watching. There are only two people watching on YouTube. We can wait till 6 o'clock, no problem.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Suresh sir, Bhaskar sir, are you okay with starting right now?
If there's nobody there, then let's wait.
Okay, okay.
You tell us when to start.
No, since the video is live on YouTube, we can already start now also. But if we want to wait 2 more minutes for some more people to come in, then that's okay.
We've started early. I think we'll have to wait. We can't start before 6 anyway. And
Sure.
we may also give maybe up to 3 minutes grace time or whatever before we start.
Sure, sir. So we can start, sir.
Good evening, friends. On behalf of the Center for Law, Policy and Human Rights Studies, I welcome you to the second talk of the 5-talk series on Indus Valley Civilization to be given by Mr. MV Bhaskar, who had the privilege of working for over 12 years with the great linguist, Mr. Iravatham Mahadevan. The response to the first talk has been very heartening. A number of questions were raised, number of comments were received, and a lot of suggestions had also come in both as questions in the chat, as also questions that were sent or comments that were sent to the email ID. The questions were ranging from the question as from the issue as to whether the Indus Valley notations can be termed to be a script at all, or they are just pictographs that was there. What is it that will make it a script? From questions like that, there were people who asked as to the link between the Indus Valley Civilization and the Aryan influx into India. Can we call it Aryan? Can we call it the incursion of nomads from the Central Asian steppe regions? what is the link between the Indus Valley Civilization's decline and the later influx from the Indus Valley into South India, particularly into places like Tamil Nadu, and the impact on Dravidian languages. A number of interesting questions were raised, and these questions are important, and we did share it with Mr. Bhaskar. Bhaskar has also given his replies in the comment section of the first talk, which is available on the YouTube site. We would welcome our friends to go into the comment section there. But we also now realize that we perhaps need to have a better way of being able to comment so that there can be a live interaction between the questions you raise and the response that Bhaskar would be giving. We invite you all uh, to, uh, to write to us at koodam.center@gmail.com so that we can have a continued interaction, and then we can also evolve a media method by which we can continuously remain in conversation, sharing ideas, sharing views, and doing everything that the Koodam does, which is a space for articulation, for discussions, for disputes, for debates, and differences. And that exactly is the spirit of the Koodam. With that backdrop, we now come into today's talk, where Mr. Bhaskar would cover 62 Indus signs, which have been elaborated upon by Mr. Iravatham Mahadevan during his lengthy work on the Indus Valley script. So, just like you all, I'm also waiting to hear about the Indus Valley signs that were decoded by Mr. Iravatham Mahadevan by Bhaskar. Before that, one subject that many people reflected back on was the topic that Bhaskar had talked about in the first talk, about the continuation of a series of signs, particularly the kolam or the rangoli. This caught a lot of people's attention, and they wrote back saying that they would be very keen on getting to know more about how these continuities have played out. The people leaf, the unicorn sign which suddenly vanished, or the designs of the urban centers that was there. That's one part. The other part is the continuities of signs, the swastika, the people leaf, and the kolam, and various other things. So I think these are many issues that caught many of our listeners' attention, and they kept writing to us saying they would like to have more material. We also shared with those of you who had sent us your contact details. We had shared some of the papers and some connections with URLs, like for example, the harappa.com site. There are some more papers which are available, which Bhaskar has very kindly shared with us, which we can share in the course of this discussion and the coming discussions. I just thought we'll give you an overview of this, because this set of lectures is slightly different from other lectures, in the sense that this is not like any other legal, political, cultural, or other type of a subject. This is a subject which all of us are interested in, but it is in its own way a very new type of a subject. So you can contact Bhaskar at the email that he has provided, MV Bhaskar at mac.com. You can also write to us at the koodam.center@gmail.com. As usual, this time we have circulated the connection to a lot of people giving the Zoom connection, so that at the end of the talk, you can send in your comments, and a few of you could also be invited to talk, so that there's a greater sense of personal interaction with Bhaskar and amongst all of us who are listening in. So I would invite you all to send in your comments so that it's there for record and Mr. Bhaskar is able to see, and our volunteers are able to document them. And as the talk progresses towards the end, we will also open it up for a few of you to be able to talk about. I also invite a couple of academics who've been working on the area of scripts, as also the link between scripts in various parts of the country and the Indus Valley script. There's a 94-year-old professor from Punjab University, Dr. Bedi, whose son had contacted us, and we welcome you, sir, if you are hopefully listening to this. There's Dr. Daisy Narayan from the Patna University, who hopefully is also part of today's discussion, and various other academics who have got to know about this talk series and who have come in. Dr. Amrita from Delhi, and a few other academics who have written to us. Please do spread the word around, and let's get to hearing Bhaskar on the science that were decoded by Iravatham Mahadevan. Over to you, Bhaskar.
Thank you, Suresh. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back here doing this after 2 weeks. We started on the 2nd of October, which was also Iravatam's birthday. What would have been his 89th birthday. So yeah, I'm happy to be back here and doing what I have been asked to do. So going from the first talk, when I was trying to figure out how to expand this into a series, I thought it will be a good idea to go back and take stock of whatever Iravatham Mahadevan has done, which is actually the place that I come from. I do not come from a university education on linguistics or archaeology or archaeometry. I learned whatever I know about the Indus script and about the Indus civilization in general. I learned it directly from Iravatham Mahadevan over a period of 10 years, as he would tell me stories. It is more like, literally the Upanishadic way of learning, sitting down near someone and learning. That's the way I learned it. So it felt appropriate to me to go back to his work and figure out what is it that I can do. And at the time, I just started counting the number of signs that he decoded. And I was able to very quickly arrive at a count of 62. But I believe the 62 is not final. It is still a growing list. By the time we come to the third of the series, that number may change. I also want to warn everybody that I'm not going to be talking about all the 62 signs today because the time will simply not be enough. But more importantly, if I just simply try to tell you the meanings of the 62 signs as decoded by Iravatham Mahadevan, you cannot follow how he arrived at that meaning, how they were deduced, and how they are to be understood, and what is the method going forward for reading some of the things on your own or on my own, for instance. So therefore, we will still concentrate on the methods of reading the script as much as we before we go into the reading of the actual 62 signs, which I think will most likely happen only in the next session. It'll be quite difficult, I think, to get to that part where I start discussing the entire inventory. This is my own handwritten copy of the inventory that I took. So this is what I have. I have 3 more pages of this. So without further ado, so let me jump into the story of the script. The Indus script, first, before we even get into what is written there, what is the content, what is the semantic there, I think we should understand the physical conditions in which we encounter the script. We encounter Indus writing. You can see on the right that image, the hand holding a seal. It is on seals of that size, predominantly, that Indus writing is found, right? That is the usual size of it. It is less than 1 inch on one side. These seals on the back have a boss, and the boss has a perforation to put a thread through, which means they worked as personal adornments. You could, put it around your arm. You could put it around your neck. You could also put it around a bundle of goods that are meant to be taken and transported, which needs to be branded in some way. So there was always a tying rope used with these seals, which bore these inscriptions and a few other things besides, such as the unicorn symbol and other field symbols of animals and other things. So these are the physical characteristics and the predominant physical characteristics of the Indus script that we should take cognizance of before we go in further. The geography of where this writing is encountered. We encounter them from Kashmir to uh, the northern banks of the Godavari River in Maharashtra, from Balochistan in the west to western UP in the east. So that is the expanse from which we obtain direct evidence and objects that bear Indus writing. We also have Indus writing that is found in other cultures, found in other geographies outside of the Indus domain, in modern day Bahrain, Oman, Iran, Iraq, Egypt. That is in all the ancient civilizations of that time. There is the Iran-Iraq Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamian civilization, and the Egyptian civilization. We have the Indus script has footprints in all these places. So this is the extent of the geography that we are talking about. Probably it is even further, but this is at least the geographical domain that we are talking about. Yep. It is also important to understand the time, not so much the timeline, but the time as it was during the period of the Indus Valley Civilization, which is generally marked to be 2600 to 1900 BCE. So in that period, we had other advanced civilizations, the Mesopotamian civilization, the Egyptian civilization, and the ancient Chinese civilization. And all of them had writing, and all of them had other evidence of structural remains, archaeological remains, and all kinds of artifactual remains that we witness. And therefore, any Indus approach to Indus study of any kind should be done in correlation and in comparison with these analogous civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China, especially Mesopotamia. In fact, if we know anything at all about Indus today, what little we know it from Mesopotamia. We will go into that detail later. Now, all of these civilizations collapsed. It was not just the Indus Valley civilization that collapsed. Over a period of time, all of them collapsed. But when these civilizations collapsed elsewhere, the literacy did not collapse with these civilizations. But in the case of Indus Valley civilization, the literacy also seemed to have collapsed. And we seem to have gone back from literacy, from written knowledge, to the pursuit of orality and recording it in the mind, rather than recording it on seals, ceilings, and tablets and other physical material. And this is the one important differentiator that we need to take note of vis-a-vis other cultures. This is not spoken about often enough. I tend to repeat it. Those of you who were there in the earlier session would have heard much about it. But I keep saying this because this is an important baseline fact that must be aware of. Okay. What language was written on the Indus artifacts? The answers range. The expert answers range from none. It was not a language. It did not encode a language at all. To some people saying that it's a Dravidian language that was encoded in the Indus script, and some other people say no, it is the Indo-Aryan languages that was encoded in the Indus script. To some other experts saying actually the Indus script encoded many languages that existed at that time in that vast region, from Balochistan to eastern UP and from Kashmir to northern Maharashtra. So it is equally possible that it represented more than one language, and so on. So there are varying and varied theories about the language component, which we will, of course, discuss in detail also. So with that brief background knowledge, I'm jumping to today's topic straight, and welcome to Indus writing. Indus writing is a list of signs. The signery comprises 417 signs, as Iravatham Mahadevan originally classified and arranged in his corpus. But subsequently, others have also come up with Indus corpora, particularly Ascoparpola, and more recently, Brian Wells. And this 417 signs have now been expanded, if I'm right, to 620. I may be a little wrong about the number, but I know it is 600 plus. And these are the signs. I will show you the list of signs. Incidentally, these signs are available in Unicode as scalable vector graphics. Anybody can download them. They are of stunning quality. You can view them with great detail, and you can magnify them to any size. This is put together by Ascoparpola's team. So without this, every time showing a pictogram was a difficult exercise. It had to be a picture. Now it can be manipulated like a font. It can be manipulated as a scalable vector drawing. So you see here, these are all the individual signs. We start mostly with people signs, and then we move to animal signs, and then we move to more of objects, and then we move to maybe amphibian. I don't know exact. And then we see birds, and then we see other animals, crab, fish, ant. Then we see plant life in various forms. We see trees, we see plants, we see tubers, and all kinds of plant life. We see implements, tools that people used in various representations. We see special characters, what we would today call diacritics. We see other markers, numeral markers, one stroke, two stroke, and other modifiers like the arrow here on top, the roof here on top, and so on and so forth. So we see all of these, and we will try and make sense of some of these in the next hour and a half. As Suresh pointed out earlier, there is time for Q&A in the end. You could also keep sending me questions on chat as we go. And Aishwarya is curating these questions and presenting them to me to answer if possible right away, and in some cases answer them offline later after the session, and in some cases answer them via mail, or in some cases answer them as part of the commenting on YouTube. So there we have this list. And this is the sign list. This sign list is the periodic table of Indus writing, of the Indus script. Without this, we can't work. This is the first instrument or the tool that we need to possess. And we have them here. Yep. So this is the last of them. For just curiosity's sake, I would also like to show the sign list compiled by Iravatham Mahadevan. This was in the 70s, and this lists 417 signs. Okay, so this is essentially the material that we are working with today, and examining this material to try and see what is it that we can understand, and what is the approach to understanding these strange characters that we encounter on the screen today. Yeah, so let me get back to my presentation. So now this can be understood as we know, we earlier spoke of the period between 2600 to 1900 years BCE. So roughly about 800 years of Indus writing is what we are. So this is a writing system that lasted about 800 years, making very simple beginnings and then acquiring sophistication as it went along. Like all scripts, there was a pictographic layer or a pictographic stage. Then later they became ideographic, then phonographic or rebus based. I will explain each one of these today, and it is my hope that we will cover whatever is on the left and in red. Whatever is blue and on the right will be covered in the next session, and whatever is black and on the right will probably be covered in the fourth session. But we will comprehensively cover all of these through these sessions. And today, I think we'll have just about enough time, hopefully, to cover what we see in red on the left. Okay. So we will start with a pictogram. Now, I just wanted to tell you that, we spoke of, in the earlier slide, we spoke of pictographic, ideographic, phonographic. And then there are conventions and there are ligatures or compound signs. Now, when we go to the very first, the most basic layer, which is the pictographic layer, or you can say the iconic layer, and we will look at some signs that we can directly understand as pictograms, as they speak to us as pictures. We don't need a language or anything else to understand these. For instance, the sign that I have on screen right now, it's the hill. If I say this is hill, I don't think there are many people out there who will disagree with me. I think most people unambiguously will process the same meaning as I do, except some people may say mountain, some people may say 3 peaks, some people may say range, but essentially we are talking about a hill or its synonyms when we access the symbol and when we interpret the symbol, and that is how we understand. We understand it directly from the picture, and we don't have to depend on any expert opinion or any explanations for interpreting or understanding this particular sign. Now, I put this up as an example, but this is not the only example. There are tens of examples like that, which can be understood purely pictographically with no help from any expert. And here are some. For instance, in the script depicts a lot of people in various walks of life. Here is a load bearer on the left. And again, I think, if I say this is a load bearer, there aren't too many people out there who will disagree with me. He is carrying something. It is a person who is carrying a load and balancing it on his shoulder. And there are 2 weights slung on either side, on the left and on the right of that person. Now, in the second sign, for instance, that person has an arrow for a head instead of a normal head. And so we could call this person an arrow or a weapons bearer of whatever kind of weapons or whatever kind of instruments that they carry, lances, axes, arrows, whatever it needed to be. So this could be an arrow bearer. The third one, for instance, instead of an arrow, it shows a jar sign. Now, not many people out there will immediately agree with me that what is on top of the neck is essentially a jar. We will come up to that. But if you set that difference of opinion aside for the moment, now you can see then you can call that person a jar bearer. The next one, you could easily read the meaning. Okay, this is a guard with a weapon in his hand. So again, I don't think many people will have an axe to grind with regard to what the meaning that I process, or the meaning that the object conveys on its own, without even me being there to process and tell you the meaning. The next one shows a man with what is probably a rake, a plow. So it's probably he is involved in plowing the field. Agriculture, he's tending to some form of an agriculture. The next one shows a human form with a banner for a head, which probably means it is a messenger, that he or she is a messenger, somebody who carries a message, a messenger with a flag. These are not things that we are not we are completely unfamiliar with. We have encountered these in subsequent histories, and therefore it is possible to relate to these in that manner. The next one shows a people leaf instead of a head. So we could easily, with a little bit of imagination and interpretation, understand it as some kind of a teacher. That is the proto Buddha, the proto Dakshinamurti, who was sitting under the people tree and teaching something. Again, somewhat speculative that, but yeah, you will get a mixed bag like this. But all I'm trying to point out here is that many of these signs can be directly processed by anybody, just like we read traffic signs, just like we read airport signs, without much help from experts. The next one, I don't think we need much of a discussion here. This is an arch. There is very clearly a bow and an arrow. The next one, for instance, is a potter. He's holding a pot in his hand. The next one is probably a person, is probably a metal smith. We know that the Indus Valley Civilization was a Bronze Age civilization. They knew metal work. So that it is that metal smith with his crucible. Then we probably see next to him the lapidarist with a gemstone and a bore drilled into it, a bead that is strung together. The next one is probably a person holding a pincer, who again probably is part of a metal working workshop, some kind of a smith, a metal smith. And the next one could easily be a man holding a horn in his hand, the hollow of a horn in his hand, inverted to hold a liquid, probably a toddy tapper. Even today, we can see the tribes carry water and other liquids like this. So there are many signs which can be accessed this way, which can be understood this way, which can be purely pictographically understood. All we need to do is to spend time and go back to this list and keep looking at it. And if you keep looking at it, this list will kind of start talking to us. Somebody has asked me the question in the meantime, what does this E6, E6C and all that mean? It is just the Unicode values. This is a Unicode table. So here are the Unicode values declared right at the top of the table. You see this? So this is part of the Unicode values that are declared there in that. So that was a question that I received on chat, and I chose to answer it straight away. We go back to the slides. What else can we? Yeah.
We still don't know what the Unicode thing means. Values.
Okay. Unicode is a common standard for representing scripts of the world.
Okay.
All languages and all scripts of the world are represented in Unicode for universal rendering, for universal accessibility, and therefore Unicode is a standard, and Unicode is a standard to which modern typography answers, and all modern typography, digital typography, uses Unicode as a standard to even craft the font, make the glyphs, and organize the glyphs into the table spaces that Unicode provides. And for instance, if you speak of Hindi Devanagari, there is a space for that. If you speak of Tamil modern, there is a space for that. If you speak of Latin ISO, there is a space for that. And if you speak of Cyrillic, there is a space for that. So every script in the world has a space in the Unicode table, an assigned space in the Unicode table. And this assignment is arrived at through a common convention and an approval process, and that is what the Unicode table represents. Is that clear, Suresh?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
What else? So what else can we directly understand? Sometimes, so as I'm showing you some signs here which encode different occupations, which encode the work life of the Indus people. This is by no means a comprehensive snapshot of all that is represented there. These are some of the more immediately accessible, more easily relatable ones. And if you dig deeper, you can see more. But is that the only way? Now, there are other ways. For instance, sometimes these signs encode gestures. I do not know if I'm on camera. For instance, the gesture, there are two signs on the left. The one sign shows a pair of upraised arms with the palm open, like this. Do you see me, Suresh? Like this. Yeah. Okay. And then below you see another, which again is also a pair of arms. It is upraised, but it is closed. For such a closed pair of arms, there is also archaeological evidence from Lothal, which I have reproduced on the right. And this gesture sign and what it means is discussed at length in a different paper. But right now, I'm only showing the ways in which the scribes and the graphic artists of the Indus society captured the essence of a picture and conveyed its meaning, not only using its direct pictorial value, but also other dynamic attributes like gestures and a few others that we see. So some of them can be understood this way as well. And again, this is not a comprehensive list in itself. This is a very small partial list. And if you dig deep, based on gesture, we can arrive at many of these. Now, the method of pictogram, ideogram, and phonogram, and the breakup and the modes of understanding of the Indus script in these terms is not unique to the Indus script alone. It is unique. It is common to all the ancient scripts. Whether you want to read Proto-Cuneiform, or whether you want to read the Egyptian hieroglyphic, or you want to read the ancient Chinese, you can pretty much take the same approach. And therefore, this is a common methodology. And this is not a unique methodology applied to the Indus script in any way. Any ancient writing began as simple representation of pictures. These pictures acquired values around themselves as ideas, and then eventually words and sounds were attributed to them, and all of these meanings coexisted over a period of time. The pictographic value was not actually discarded the moment it acquired a phonographic value or anything like that. So they were all kept together. In fact, this is much more evident in Egyptian hieroglyphic, which is a deciphered script as well. So if we go and look at Egyptian hieroglyphy, you can see the heavy overlap of the initial pictographic meaning and how it then becomes phonographic, and then actually how it becomes syllabic, and how it continues its presence right through the journey of the hieroglyphic Egyptian writing of almost 3,000 years. So what we are looking at is a common method, but for reasons of brevity, I am using only examples from Indus at the moment. I'm not showing examples from other scripts, but if there is time in the end, I will also show you some examples from Egyptian and Proto-Cuneiform, not the later cuneiform, all of which can be understood in these terms. So going ahead, the Indus script can also be looked at on an artifactual basis. That is, what is it that these people wrote about? They wrote about things that they made. For instance, this is a structure that is there in as it's a prominent structure of the Indus Valley Civilization. This is generally referred to as the granary or the treasury. And we see the plan of the structure is encoded as an Indus script. So the Indus people represented many of the things that they made, the cities that they made, the buildings that they made, the public structures that they made. Many of the artifacts that the Indus Valley Civilization produced eventually found its way into its written material. I'm now going to give you a partial list of this for you to understand that this writing is not, even though we don't know many things about it, this writing is not produced in a vacuum. This writing is not myth. It has a basis in concrete reality. It has a synthetic core apart from its naturalist beginnings. So all of these together constitute what we regard as Indus writing. So it is very important to understand that there are a lot of signs there that have an objective evidence, even if we do not know it by words. Some, as I said, some people call it granary, some people call it treasury, some people call it something else. But what we do know when we see the left and right is this is that. So this is a certain something that we can quite easily see across many signs and the evidence of it in many of the other archaeological remains of the Indus Valley Civilization. So this is one example, for instance. The other one, so this is a very storied example. This is actually the excavated remains of what we know to be the world's oldest plowed field in Kalibangan. Now, this has a representation and it has many variants, as you see on the left in the script. This can be broadly understood as a plowed field. It can be understood as country. It can be understood as field. It can be understood as land. And it can be used in association with other symbols to the left and to the right, which will give other meanings like highlands, lowlands, wetlands, and so on and so forth. But here, this is another very strong evidence of the fact that the Indus people pretty much wrote about what they did. It's about their life. That's what they wrote about. And they wrote about the natural aspects of their life, such as the landscape and the mountains that we saw at the start of this, which had a completely naturalistic beginning, to the synthetic, the artifactual heritage of Indus, of the contemporary aspect of its life at that time. That is equally represented in the Indus scenery. They wrote their cities into the script. What you see on the right is a simulation. We don't have any such excavated remains as you see. All the excavated remains, you will see them flattened. So the elevation will not exist. This is a simulation of an elevation. And you can see that this simulation is also encoded into the script by the scribes and the artisans of the Indus Valley Civilization. Yeah. So there is a very strong physical basis to the Indus script. It is not some speculative mythology. It is not without its controversy. It is not without its disagreement. In fact, there is more disagreement than agreement. We don't know the language, but that doesn't mean it's a lost cause. It can still be studied. It can still be understood. It can still be accessed, and it informs us in many ways. And it is important to study it from the point of view of the script, mainly because the script represents many objects, for instance, which have also not been archaeologically found. Similarly, there are archaeologically found objects, some which do not have a representation in the Indus script. So we have to put all this composite material together to have a fair understanding of a complex and an enigmatic subject, such as the Indus script. So, but one thing is very, very clear: it has a very, very strong physical artifactual basis. Yeah? Um, they wrote the beads that they make, that they were famous for all over Mesopotamia and beyond, and to which geographies they exported these fine art and finely crafted jewelry. So they wrote the beads into their script. So you have the beads here with a hole and a thread running through them, and you see the remains of that from we recover this not only from the Indus Valley Civilization itself. We recover a lot of this kind of necklaces and beads strung together from Mesopotamia, and there is evidence that it was coveted at that point in time. It is also evident from archaeometric analysis that the beadwork of the Harappans, that is the Indus Valley people, was the state of the art at that time. It was the finest. The beadwork, whether it was in carnelian, or it was in steatite, or it was in lapis lazuli, in whatever material that they were working it into, the beadwork executed by the Indus artisans was state of the art, and it represented the best of its times, and it was coveted all over, and it was an international fashion at the time across the Fertile Crescent, as much as it was in the Indus Valley Civilization natively. So that they encoded into the script. I'm really pushing myself here, but I couldn't resist the speculation, so I put it down here. So for what else did they encode? Now this character that we see on the seal on the right is much spoken about as Proto Shiva, Rudra, and so on and so forth. And is there a shorthand of certain Indus characters depicted on the seals that we find on the script? So this is a question mark. I should include a question mark. I shall include it here. But it could well be that, this is a shorthand of the horned deity, as it were, that we see on the seal. So we have lots and lots of evidence. I also try to obtain evidence of this is ongoing work. This is work in progress. The Science with Objective Evidence is a compilation that I'm working on. I'm sure other compilations, similar compilations, exist, but I'm not compiling it for the sake of novelty. I'm really compiling it for my own understanding, to see where and how far this can lead me. For instance, whether I'm going to find 10 or 20 or 50 or whatever. So far, I think I've found about 20, and I'm sharing about 4 or 5 here. But for instance, is there a similar shorthand for the unicorn? Is a question that immediately pops up. Was the unicorn actually encoded in some way in the script? Was there a shorthand for the unicorn? Was there a shorthand for other field symbols which are not part of the script, such as this one? For instance, for the tiger, for the elephant, for the rhinoceros, for the bovine creatures, which the Indus script is full of. Is there a shorthand for that in the script? Is an open question that needs a lot of investigation. There are many investigations, there are many reports, there are many papers to study on the subject by very many scholars all over the world. But these are standard questions to ask, and these are standard questions of any inquiry of I would say a mark of inquisitiveness. Anybody who's kind of curious about what these were, they would tend to ask these questions. Some of these questions may be fair questions, some of these questions may be unfair questions. For instance, the one unfair question that is most asked is, does Indus encode, is it Tamil or Sanskrit? That is the stupidest question that can ever be asked about the Indus script. It is neither Tamil, it is nor Sanskrit. neither of these languages existed at the time is the truth. It is a form of an early Dravidian, or it is a form of an early Indo-Aryan. But anyway, this particular session is not about language. We'll come to that in greater detail later. But I'm saying we can end up asking a lot of very stupid questions. And with stupid questions, we get stupid answers, or we don't get answers at all. So for instance, when you ask a question like whether it is Tamil or Sanskrit, you won't get an answer. You will only get, but it seems to be the question that a lot of people want to ask for whatever reason. I think it largely has to do with an identity. It is an identity question. It is not a question about the Indus script. It is a question about who we are, where we belong in this history and in this society. So when we ask whether it is a Tamil or Sanskrit, we are asking an identity question and not an objective question about the Indus script. And therefore, such questions must be consciously thought about, processed before and asked, whether they are even reasonable to ask. So we have a range of evidences: everyday life, work life, occupation, many objects that they created which are represented in the script, many icons that they invented which also find their way into the script. All this can be understood purely pictographically, iconographically. And since you are not reading any language into this, and since you're not presupposing any kind of language into this, it is all right actually to look for similarities also from later history. For instance, what did this look like later in later history? For instance, if I were to show you what this looked like in later history, it looked like many things. Let me show you. So it starts out this way, let us say, and then it ends up looking. These are from Sumerian, from Egyptian, from archaic Chinese, from hieroglyphic Hittite, and from Indus. And you can see the similarities, the similar ways in which early pictographic writing was how it was common to all the civilizations of that time. You can see that here, and you can see how in later times on coins in India, in the early history of India, in the Mauryan period and later, how the sharp features of the hills become rounded, and how they are subsequently represented, and what kind of variations come into that. All that, so when you study it purely iconographically, purely pictorially, it is all right to draw parallels not only from that time or from a time earlier, but also from the times later. And you will not be mixing up history very badly, because you're only talking about iconographic continuity. Okay, you're only talking about pictographic continuity. We are not assuming a language. We are not assuming anything else. So it is all right to approach it in that manner. So it is for that reason that I showed you what I showed you. Yeah. So let me get back to. Okay, we have seen all this. Let me go to the next sign, which is a pictogram plus an ideogram. What is an ideogram? A picture is literally what it is. So when you see the mountain, it is a mountain. Whereas an ideogram can contain meanings in it that represents, apart from, let us say, sun as proposed here. It could also mean day. It could mean the eye in the sky. It could mean the wheel of time. That there are 6 divisions there could mean there are 6 seasons. And so it is no longer representing a picture. It is representing a whole range of ideas, and hence it is an ideogram, which again is common to all scripts, that you use one particular symbol and then use it to denote all ideas that that particular sign or that picture is capable of invoking. All the semantic baggage that it has innately embedded into it can be ascribed to it, and can be processed from it, and can be cognized from it. And this is one such sign. This is the sun sign. The sun sign is very special to Indus. It is probably the most important sign of the Indus Valley Civilization, for many reasons. Now it has many variants. It probably began like this. On the top row, what you see on the left, it began like this. It proceeded to, evolve and eventually become, instead of circular, a little bit ovoid, as they were squeezing characters into the small little tiny seals and stamps that they were making to save space. So from circular, it becomes kind of ovoid, and that is something that we can see. And this entire journey we can see on the Indus signery and on all the objects that we come across in the Indus. And the sun sign also occurs as a ligature or as a compound sign in various ways. Again, this by no means is a comprehensive snapshot of all the ligatures or all the sun signs that are there, but some of them are representative of what they come to mean. Sorry. The reason this sign is important to the Indus Valley Civilization is that we know the existence of this sign long before we even know of the Indus script. It existed before even writing began. It existed on its own as a pictogram, not part of a text sequence of 4, 5, or more characters, but it occurred on its own. It occurred as an object. It occurred as graffiti. It occurred on bangles. It occurred on pottery. It occurred on axe, metal axe, and it also occurred as part of it. Is the so I will show you some of the instances. For instance, you see this. This is actually an amulet. I spoke about this in the last session also. This is an amulet, all of 5 millimeter, made of copper, not an alloy, but copper, which by many archaeometrists and metallurgists today is thought to be very audacious on the part of the craftsmen of that period, to have attempted to forge pure copper in the lost wax method. So this is an amulet. It is probably worn around the neck. So the sun sign has an existence, and noticeable existence as an independent object, okay, in a very early proto-Indus period, in the form of this object and other objects. So this is something that, this is the reason. For instance, many of the other signs in the Indus signery do not have this kind of independent or pre-writing existence. Some have, but not many. The sun sign is singular for its independent precedence of the Indus script as we have come to know it. So that is why this is probably the most important sign in the signery. It is the only sign, as far as I know, that occurs directly on a unicorn ever. There is no other sign. None of the other 416 signs of the Indus script appear directly on the unicorn as the sun sign does. Okay, though the sign above it is actually more numerous. This is the most numerous sign, save for something else. I will tell you about it later. But this is far more numerous than the sun sign. The one that you see above is far more numerous, but it is the sun sign alone that occurs, and only rarely, but only once on a unicorn directly, and there is no other sign that occurs directly on a unicorn. Yeah. Here, for instance, you see the sun sign. It is almost invocatory for that uh, 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 um, uh, scene that is depicted um, over there of a woman fighting two beasts with both her arms. And this particular sign is solace. It does not share the space with other signs, and it is almost invocatory in terms of its position and in terms of its centrality. So the sun sign occurs in this manner, and therefore, which gives it additional importance. These are very important attributes of the sun sign that need to be understood before we try to understand the sun sign itself for what it is. It occurs, of course, as an initial sign in many sign sequences, and the occurrences, I think, is about 130 odd as an initial sign. It also occurs as a medial sign, sometimes that is in between. Instead of in the first position that you see here, it may occur somewhere in the middle. It may repeat itself in a sequence. There are Indus text sequences in which the sun sign occurs as many as 4 times, once as a continuous pair, and again discretely with other signs in between. So this sign occurs. It's a popular initial sign, more than 130 occurrences as an initial sign. So it occurs that way, with motive. It occurs as an initial sign on seals and tablets that have no motive but only text, only the script. There again, it appears as an initial sign. So it's the importance of the sign to the people of the Indus can never be overemphasized, and that has to be really understood. Every time we start the topic of Indus script, it is common for people who have some kind of a peripheral awareness about the subject to talk about the fish, and jump to the fish and the language arguments thereof as the first starting point. But I really want to drag it back, and I want to point to the importance of the sun sign and its various manifestations and representations on the Indus artifacts, to understand how important and what a central character that this particular sign occupied in the Indus vocabulary. Here again, for instance, if you see, there are symbols like a tiger here, or a bull here. There are so many other signs, numerous signs on top, but here is the sun sign that is on its own. It's almost like it is, I am the first among equals, kind of on its own. Even as a ligature, as a compound sign, it is like, I am a first among the equal, I am on my own. It stands apart, it stands out, it occupies a central position. It is of extreme importance to the Indus people, and all these are pieces of evidence that go to establish that, really. So if we now go to objects, this is an axe, and you can see the writing here. In fact, it's magnified here. You can see it here. You can see the sun sign occurring twice in succession, starting in the initial position. It also occurs on a bangle, and occurs solo. So if you start jumping into the sun sign, that is a study in itself, that it can occupy you for years. And there's so much material there, and it is so loaded. So the sun sign has to be understood for whatever it means. We know some of the meanings, we don't know some of the meanings, but as an ideogram, we could summarize the following meanings. It's sun, it is day, It is an eye in the sky. It is the wheel of time. It is law. It is order. The wheel is within quotes. I've expressed it there because I don't think it meant a wheel at that time, because the spoked wheel did not exist in the Indus Valley Civilization. It came later, and therefore, when we read wheel into the sign, we read later history into that sign, and not the contemporary Indus history into that sign. So for that reason, we don't call it a wheel. As a working hypothesis, we like to keep sun. But later on, it does become chakra. The same wheel becomes Dhamma chakra. It becomes part of Ashoka's insignia. Then it becomes part of our national emblem. The rest is history. I mean, we all know it. But when we look at our Indus past, we have to discard some of the later historical baggage and see it for what it was at that time. And it probably was a sun at the time. And has anybody proposed a language value, a phonetic value to this? Is something that we will see as we go forward. But this is how we begin with a pictogram, and then we recognize in the pictogram an ideogram. Yeah. So the meaning or the semantic gets layered. Yeah. Now, whenever we speak about the sun sign, we also have to speak about other comparable signs. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs that I'm showing here. These are the 5 signs that occur with the greatest frequency as initial signs in Indus writing. And I have shown it in the diminishing order of frequency from left to right. This occurs more than 200 times. This occurs about 130 times, and so on. So we need to understand. So if we understand these 5 signs in some way, with reasonable assurance, we would have understood a lot about the Indus society and Indus polity. Even if we still do not know the language, and if we know the language on top of that, it's bonus. And inevitably, we will need to interpolate our notions of what language was encoded into that, bringing some bias into the study of this, in order to see whether it yields a phonetic value that can then be justified by other means. So we will go to that next. So before that, I also want to show you that this occurs as an initial sign like this. It is, as an aside, I'm saying this, it is possible to actually, if you compare this sign and this sign in terms of their presence, overall presence, and their frequency, and how they appear, and on materials that they appear, you can see that for some period they coexist, and then the sun sign kind of gives way to this, and lets this be the more of the initial sign. Not an easy concept to understand. I'm giving you the trend without giving you the numbers, but this is something that can be seen. It exhibits those characteristics. So you can see that these two signs share the space, share the attention, occur equally here and there, and then at some point in time, the sun sign is less evident, and this on the left, which could be called the house sign or whatever, becomes more prominent. It also is a shift in some ways from a naturalist worldview to a synthetic artifactual worldview, as as a civilization progresses and begins to build houses and cities, and vast number of them across a vast stretch of terrain. So this sign becomes more important than the sign. Yeah. So this sign is variously read as a house, a fortified house, or an upper house. Ultimately, with the Dravidian scholars like Iravatham Mahadevan and Parpola reading the upper house or male aham into this, and also suggesting that Meluha, which is the Mesopotamian reference to the Indus Valley civilization and the Indus Valley people, is actually a Mesopotamian expression for male agham or this particular sign. Okay, so it is the people of the upper city, or it is the upper city, or it is from the upper city, or it is of the upper city, or of male aham, that is the upper house. Now the house is an interesting vocabulary in early scripts. In Egyptian also, the house plays a central role. The original meaning of pharaoh is simply house. So these are not arbitrarily considered. There are some parallels we drop when we have absolutely no internal evidence. We have to look at other cultures and borrow analogous evidence from there. And if we borrow such an analogous evidence, there is a fair reason to call this a house, and based on which to call it an upper house. This sign, because it is so numerous, it also has an incredible number of variants. We won't have time to go into all those variants today. You can, for instance, I can go back to the table and show it to you again. Here we go. Start around here, and you will see a lot of stuff happening. And then see around you see around here. You know, look at start around here, and then go up till all the composites that we have, all the ligatures that we have, right up till this. You know, you have a lot of variants to this sign. So this also was a very important sign. It meant a lot of things to the Indus people. It was obviously recognized for some kind of authority, some kind of centralized communication, some kind of identity, some kind of a from address. It represented all those things. It was represented on goods that left the Indus Valley. It was also probably the personal adornment of the people who sent those goods with their markings on those goods, and so on and so forth. So this is an important sign as well, and much of the exciting linguistic concepts that we have about our Harappan heritage is centered around this particular one, especially Melaham and Meluha. Okay, so this has a lot of semantic connotations. Yeah. The next one, you see, we go to a level where we combine the pictographic with the ideographic and the phonographic. That is, it now has a picture, it now has an idea, and it now also has a sound, right? So the fish sign is the most famous sign of the Indus Valley civilization. Um, it was with the fish sign that Father Henry Hiras opened up the Dravidian hypothesis of the language of the Indus Valley Civilization. So it is the most recognizable, the most talked about, the most discussed, and therefore also the most controversial sign that we can get from the Indus signery. There is nothing more controversial than this, but there is also nothing simpler and more elegant than the hypothesis put forth by Father Henry Hiras, which subsequently forever occupied the imagination of succeeding generations of linguists, epigraphists, and all people that attempted to decode the Indus script in one way or the other. So he proceeded from the hypothesis that in Dravidian languages, that is in Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, Tulu, Gondi, Kurkh, Malto, Kuvi, Brahvi, in so many Dravidian languages, okay, not just Tamil alone. Our Tamil brothers are very fond of claiming the entire Indus heritage unto themselves. And that is a bit of a crime. That's a bit of a shame that we do that. Because by doing that, we actually isolate the other people who have that heritage and who have a right to that heritage, and who therefore do not identify with us. And we end up isolating ourselves by denying them the Indus heritage. So this is a common thing that people make. I mean, I'm not saying researchers do this. They are very clear in what they do. The scholars do not do this. Scholars do not get into this quagmire. But common people, especially the Tamil people, are over enthusiastic about the Indus heritage of Tamils and believe that nobody else carries the Indus heritage except us. Okay, that is something that we should be very, very conscious about setting aside in order to achieve a fair understanding of what we are doing. So the word min or mean in its dirgha, long form, meant both fish and star in all the Dravidian languages. Now, of course, you could say meenam is also Indo-Aryan, it is also Sanskrit, but the comparative dictionary of the Indo-Aryan languages is very, very clear that meenam is of Dravidian origin. So the word is securely Dravidian. And if we take that word and we take the homonym, where mean means both fish and star, then we can immediately start reading the sign as either fish or a star or as both. When we read it as a fish and when we read it as a star would be entirely dependent on the circumstances in which the fish sign makes its appearance. Okay. In other words, what is before it, what is after it, what is below it, what is above it, what is the object that it appears on, and so on and so forth. Right. So it will depend, the meaning will depend on the text and the context and the initial proposition advanced by Father Henry Hiras, I think lasted almost 70 years. People still take that hypothesis. It's still a working hypothesis. People still use that. There have been significant advancements made on it by the Dravidian scholars, especially again the Finnish scholars and the Indian Dravidian scholarship, largely represented by Iravatham Mahadevan, and the Finnish scholarship spearheaded by Asko Parpola and team. So they have advanced the hypothesis considerably from the time of Father Henry Hiras. And for instance, I will show you the stunningly beautiful sign in which it shows the fish sign and shows 7 lines next to it, making it absolutely inevitable for us to read it as 7 fish or 7 star or seven sages, or Ursa Major, or the Great Plow, or the Saptarishi Mandala, and so on and so forth. It is absolutely, it's sitting there. It is sitting there waiting to be called that. The moment we say fish equals star, and then we can read, and immediately, if we see 6 lines in front of it, we can read it as Pleiades, or the Kartigai stars. So we can keep on adducing meanings to it. So that therefore, since began to yield meaning on further research, the scholarship was enthused and kept pushing at the meaning, pushing at the semantic that can be squeezed out of the fish and its accompanying context, and pulled out the star meaning to its fullest. Let me show you. I didn't put the table inside here, but I can show you a table probably. No, forget it. Another time. I'll share the table later. But there is a table of fish and star correspondence. And when we say star, it is not only star; it is also planets. So there is Saturn there, there is Venus there, and there are the constellations there, like Pleiades, and the Great Plow, or the Seven Sages. So the North Star. So there is a fish sign list with a fish sign variant list, along with numerals and various other things for context, which yield meanings of various constellations and various planets, and so on and so forth. And Parpola has his own table, and Iravatham Mahadevan has his own table. And you could go through those tables. I could share them too, or they are in the public domain. You can access them. So it was understood as fish and star. Meant fish and star. They are homonyms. This kind of a homonym is called rebus. So a rebus principle or a rebus technique is a good way to inquire into an unknown writing. But every time you use the rebus method to inquire into an unknown script, you are fundamentally making a language hypothesis and interpolating that language hypothesis into it, because rebuses do not travel across languages. Let me give you an example. Okay. In the English language, if I draw an eye, okay, it could also mean the personal pronoun I, and that is a rebus for you, right? It is a pictogram. I draw an eye. Okay, depending on context, I can read it as I, or I can read it as an ideogram to see, or sight, or vision, and so on and so forth, or as a personal pronoun I, right? So, and if you take that rebus and put it into another language, it won't work. It just won't work. So essentially, the moment you come to the rebus principle and the use of the rebus principle, it is inevitable that you presuppose the language. Okay, and most of the language presupposed by Iravatham Mahadevan, who is my primary source, okay, is a form of Dravidian. Some people like to call it Tamil, and I have already given enough reasons as to why you should not be called Tamil. Some other people like to call it Proto-Dravidian, and Iravatham Mahadevan did not agree with the term Proto-Dravidian. He considered it Proto-Dravidian to be older than Indus Dravidian. So he preferred to use the term Indus Dravidian. It is not conventionalized. I don't think much of the world scholarship or anybody else follows the term really. But that was the working term that he preferred, Indus Dravidian. And that Indus Dravidian comes at a time that is after the Proto-Dravidian and much before the Dravidian, that branched off and then became Telugu and Kurukh and Malto and Kuvi and Tamil and Malayalam and Kannada and Tulu and all the 25 Dravidian languages that we know of today. So apparently this branching and regionalization of a composite Dravidian began a little over 2000 years ago. Okay, before that, language, the composite Dravidian had not really begun to settle into regional Dravidian, which today linguists would call it Northern Dravidian, Middle Dravidian, Southern Dravidian, and so on and so forth. But somewhat more accessibly, we can simply call it Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, and so on, before it branched. See, language has always had a very strong geographical connotation. Language acquires the characteristics of the land that where that language is practiced. For instance, we know that much of Tamil poetry, Sangam poetry, is a codification of the landscape of Tamil country, of the 5 landscapes or the Tinais that we speak about. So language, whether in poetry or in its very genesis of morphogenesis, draws something from the geography. And it is when the composite Indus Dravidian begins to branch off and takes and settles into various destinations that it acquires local characteristics, local geographical characteristics, and then becomes the localized languages or dialects, as we may call them. And that happens only later, a little over a journey that began a little over 2000 years ago, not much earlier than that. By which time we already have the Sangam period here. We already have ancient inscriptions in Tamil country. But despite that overlap, heavy overlap, despite the presence of some symbolism, some poetic allusions to what is an Indus past, the direct prominent symbolisms like the unicorn or many other aspects of the Indus Valley civilization, central aspects of the Indus Valley civilizations are not evident, despite the overlap of when Dravidian began to branch and when it eventually became Dravidian. And with that period, early Tamil, literary Tamil, had an overlap. I'm not talking about just spoken Tamil. There was an early literary Tamil which had an overlap with that period. So now this remained in this state. Anyway, to get back to the fish sign, this remained pretty much in this state for a very, very long time. The knowledge of it, until one day Mahadevan asked the question in Tamil, Min is not just star. Min is not just fish. Min is anything that glitters, anything that shimmers, anything that radiates. We speak of lightning as Min. We speak of firefly as Min. We speak of modern electricity today as Min in contemporary usage. So Min is anything that glitters, anything that shines. So from a phonographic fixation, okay, he actually took it back into the ideographic bridge that lay unexplored for a long time over there, largely drawing from one clue by D.D. Kosambi, the last great polymath of India, okay, who likened the fish of the Indus Valley civilization to bathing beauties or the apsaras. So one day, Iravatham Mahadevan began to see shimmering bathing beauties in the bath, the great bath of Mohenjo-daro. When he first told me this, I asked him, what were you smoking at that time? He's of course squeaky clean, but that was the leap of imagination that Iravatham Mahadevan attained. And then to the bathing beauties, he brought and he noticed that there are 7 types of fish. There are many other types of fish, of course. He noticed 7 types of fish and categorized these 7 types of fish, which is just a fish with a roof, a fish with rays, a fish with a vertical stroke, a fish with a slanted stroke, a fish with a rake next to it, a fish with 2 tall lines next to it. But if you actually get into the fish scenery, you'll see it's much more complex. I'll briefly go there. I think we're running out of time. Sorry about this. You see the extent of variations available on the, which again is very frequent, but it does not occur very much in the initial position, but in the medial position it is very frequent. Again, it occurs hundreds of times in Indus texts, and it appears in many avatars. The word avatar there was not accidental. We will come to why I use that word in a little while. So he took all this fish, he did a survey of that and made a short list of 7 fish signs and looked at the attributes of each of those and came to the conclusion that each one of them represented either an apsara. Of course, apsara is later Vedic terminology. In fact, in Rig Veda, there is only one apsara. There is Urvashi. No, there is no other apsara. All the other apsaras come only after the Rig Veda. And this is before even the Rig Veda. At that time, there were no apsaras, but that is the only reference. Nymph is the word to use. So he began to see celestial nymphs bathing in the great bath of Mohenjo-daro, okay, who were later recognizable as apsaras. And if you looked at it closely enough, they were not only bathing women, but they were also bathing men, which means they were also Gandharvas beside apsaras, and significantly advanced our understanding of the fish sign by looking at an ignored aspect of it that lay buried there all the time, which is the ideographic layer. People went directly from the pictographic to the phonographic, but in between there was a huge ideographic layer. If only you were to investigate it as that which glitters or that which shines, and he latched on to that and extracted a whole meaning. And that paper is a very beautiful paper. It's available. All these papers are available online. I'll give you the sources. The fish of Mohenjo-daro swam in the great bath. Is a great paper in which he proceeds to outline. And of course, it is also possible to go beyond fish and look at if it is glitter. And we know that Indus people had gold. They knew to work with gold. They knew to work with shiny metal. So we can probably see metal and many things that glitter and the characteristics of metal. And such an angle was not explored by him or suggested by him ever. So I'm being very adventurous and sticking my neck out. I may be ridiculed, laughed at for this. But this is merely to make the point that the moment you do not get fixed on the object, but one of its attributes or something like a gesture or something like an object that already exists there. So a picture can be seen in many ways and it can be processed and understood in many ways. That before there is semantic understanding, there is a semiotic understanding, and that semiotic understanding itself has much to give us. Is the point that I'm trying to make, and therefore I ventured to, be a little adventurous in suggesting the metal aspect of the fish. So. So you can go on. So if you look at it this way, so we have gone through the pictographic, we have gone through one example or many examples pictographic. We have gone through one very expansive example, namely in the sun sign of the purely ideographic. We don't know the word for it. Nobody suggested a word. We could suggest a word. That's a little later. Then another sign we take where based on the Dravidian hypothesis, linguistic hypothesis, min is suggested as the phonetic phono component, and based on that, the understanding of that sign is processed for decades before somebody gets this spark and says, "Hey, why not I look at another aspect of it? Why don't I look at its ideographic potential? Why don't I interpret it not as the object that is represented, but a quality of that object that is represented, namely glitter?" And then I am able to come away with a whole load of meanings that I was not able to read before. This is the way our understanding advances. All first principles, other than the pictographic and the ideographic principle, all phonographic first principles are questionable. They are open to debate. Okay, you cannot say it constitutes a proof. Okay, but what we do is that the reason I said 62 signs is not exactly a small body of evidence, and evidently I think I will end up with a list that is closer to 80 or so, and I will share the full list in the next session. I think we are now running out of time, and I should hand over in 7 minutes for question and answers, and therefore I will not really explore it much further than to just summarize whatever we've gone through today and whatever we have not gone through today. So I think I'll go to that first. So we began saying we will cover the left-hand side, the pictographic, the ideographic, the phonographic. We've not covered the conventions and the ligatures, and I don't think there's time to cover it. We will cover it. We've also not covered, we never set out to cover the linguistic grammar, positional, statistical thing for this session. It was always meant for the next session. But all this understanding becomes much easier if it is understood first at this level. And that is why I wanted to take the time to make that very, very clear, as unambiguous as it can be for everybody. In the audience, there may be very learned scholars here to whom all this is, kindergarten stuff. There may be people who know nothing about this, but who have a curious mind, who have their faculties of logic intact, and their intelligence and IQs decent, and therefore they can process whatever is given logically, coherently, without much contradiction. So it was baseline. This had to be baselined for all types of audience and not for one type of audience. And therefore, I'm always falling back to the basics, and I'm unable to somewhat go beyond the fundamentals, which I hope to break through to and go into proper in the next one. When we speak also it's just as well that I do not go into linguistic grammar and all that stuff right now, because grammar is the subject that you start talking about when you want to lose your audience. Okay, but now whatever I've held, whatever audience remains here, I do not want to lose them for the rest of the time that's available. So grammar, we will reserve it for later. But I'm sorry we couldn't cover the conventions, the ligatures, and some of their aspects today. We will take them up next. That said, let me make a very quick summary. So pictogram plus ideogram plus phonogram equals a logogram, and we understand that each sign in the signery represents a word, a logo. So a sign that represents a word then becomes a logo. As it also features the phonetic component, it is logosyllabic, and therefore the Indus script is spoken of as a logosyllabic script, much as many other scripts are spoken of as logosyllabic scripts, especially the Egyptian hieroglyphic script. And it is generally read from right to left. This is about the only unanimity there is amongst scholars about the Indus script. But while there is unanimity in this among scholars, there is no unanimity within the Indus script. The Indus script, there are places where it can be read from right to left, left to right. There can be places where it can be read boustrophodon, and so on and so forth. So there are some exceptions where it does not always read right to left, but there is at least scholarly consensus that the Indus script must be read in the script, which is a logosyllabic script. Okay, and logosyllabic for all the reasons that we have seen before, and all the investigative methods that we have seen before, to be logosyllabic, and it is read from right to left. And so what do we know? The only name of any person till date that we know from the Indus Valley Civilization is a certain Su Ilishu, who is a translator of Meluha, okay, and who is written about in this Akkadian cuneiform that you see here on this. And this little fellow, almost sitting on the lap of this fellow, the big, mighty royal fellow, the Mesopotamian royalty, and that little fellow is Su Ilishu. This is about the only name that we know from the Indus Valley Civilization through a script or by any other means. Probably the people on the other side facing the Mesopotamian royalty are guests from Meluha, coming to the court of the Mesopotamian royalty, and there is the interpreter or the translator of Meluha, Su Ilishu, who is moderating the session between them, which is as much as we know in terms of an actual name is concerned. So with that said, I will open this up for questions. These questions, Aishwarya, if you have any, you could please read them out to me. I don't see anything in the chat here anymore.
Bhaskar, this is Abhijit.
Yes, Abhijit.
Yeah, Aishwarya, due to bad connection, she had to drop. So I was.
I thought you were the one with Hyderabad floods who were going to be
yes,
out.
I managed somehow, and then I
Yeah.
joined in the middle, and then
Good to have you here. Good to have you here. Anyway, yeah.
So I was following YouTube, and I think I got few questions which I have posted in the chat. Those questions are from YouTube.
Okay.
And I think you have largely covered those questions while you are, doing the presentation.
Okay. So there is no more question to answer.
Not in YouTube, and we don't see any in Zoom also. Yeah.
Oh well. Okay. So do we utilize the rest of the time, or?
No, yes, why don't you complete those two sections? I'm Saila here. That other things.
Those are slightly difficult. It may need more time than that, Shaila.
Okay, that convention and.
Yeah. So because we are dealing with diacritics and the modifiers and things like that, it might need a little more time than we have on hand at the moment.
But there's one question which just came in YouTube. It says, yeah. What is meant by synthetic in this context?
Man-made, artifactual.
Okay.
As opposed to natural. For instance, when I draw the sign of a mountain, okay, I am drawing a natural phenomenon. When I'm drawing the sun, I'm drawing a natural phenomenon. But when I'm drawing a house, I'm drawing a house that's made by me, made by man.
This is Mallika. Can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, please.
You said that Su Ilishu is the translator of Meluha. and and you said there's a small boy sitting there. So how do you attribute the age and the meaning of him being a translator?
We
How
don't
can
know
you
whether
connect it?
we don't know the age. We don't know if it's a small boy. It's an artistic convention to represent these people as small.
Okay.
I mean, you can see that in even in Nayaka paintings, even in Ramayana paintings, where in certain places, the monkey god will be really tiny at the feet of Rama, and then in other places, he'll be a giant. It's an artistic convention to represent people small and make the royalty big. So we don't know the age of Su-Yilishu or anything from that inscription. What we do know is that there is a translator of Meluha called Su-Yilishu there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And in the initial, when you showed the whole lot of symbols in the pictogram, there was one with which one you said is a blacksmith. Could it also be a shield for in the maybe as a warrior?
I'll go here.
Yeah, the second line, the third one.
The third one, I said it was a lapidarist.
Yeah, could it not be a shield and with a warrior or something like that? Something like the archer?
It could be. The thing is, see, we have strong evidence for a lapidary. We don't have very strong evidence for a war.
Okay, because you said there's an archer. Archer could also be for hunting and not really for a war. The last one, on the first line, the last one, he happens to be with a bow and arrow. So I thought maybe that could also depict, somebody going to war, or maybe
that could just be hunting, right?
Hunting,
a bow and arrow is not necessarily at war. I mean, the thing is, we immediately imagine Arjuna. But that need not be the case. Bow and arrows were used for hunting, and for various other purposes. It may have even been used in construction to anchor a rope at an altitude. You know what I mean? So there are various uses for a bow and arrow, and there is very little evidence of any war. So any warlike attributions should be avoided if avoidable.
Okay. Thank you.
Bhaskar, another question came just now in YouTube.
Yes.
The question is from Suresh Sundaram. Says, any context on how this science and language were linked to the civilization X, where this used to govern defense, commerce, and arts?
Please read it again. I'm not sure I understand the question properly.
I'll just type it here.
Sure.
Yeah. It's in the chat box. Any context on how this science and language were linked to the civilization?
I see nothing in the Zoom chat. Where are you putting this question?
Zoom chat.
I see nothing.
Just check.
It is the first question on synthetic.
Please repeat. Let me process the question properly first. Both the questions, the first and a question from Suresh.
Any context on how this science and language were linked to the civilization, where this is used to govern defense, commerce, arts?
Definitely. See, commerce is immediately and extensively evident. Okay, the Indus Valley Civilization had standardized weights and measures, and reasonably standardized workshops for pottery, for bead making, for metal working, and for forging alloys with copper and tin, and as is characteristic of a Bronze Age civilization. And this was evident across a very vast geography, in hundreds of cities, not in just one place. In in Harappa or in Mohenjo-daro alone. This was evident in Rakhigarhi, in Surkotada, wherever, in Lothal, in Banawali, any city you went to. In fact, it is also understood now there is an Italian team called Massimo Vidale and Dennis Frenes, two archaeologists, who are finding a lot of new evidence for how the Indus merchants established workshops outside of India to serve customer needs over there on the coastal route of Dilmun, that is modern day Oman and Bahrain, to serve customers in the Fertile Crescent, amongst whom the Indus artifacts, especially jewelry and stuff, was in great demand. So yeah, a great deal of conventionalization exists through commerce. We do not know how much of a conventionalization exists through polity, because we don't even know the nature of the polity of Indus. But we do understand there must have been some kind of a central administration as well as a federated local administration, which must have been working in tandem with each other for such a vast geography to arrive at standard conventions that could be understood across these distances and even maybe languages. About the language component, again, it is very important to understand that India was always linguistically diverse. If we go to what was the geographical expanse of the Indus Valley Civilization then, and look at the number of languages available today over there, you will probably count in the core area, you'll count about half a dozen languages. But if you took the entire expanse, you'll probably count hundreds of languages. So it is so obviously there were many languages in use. The question that we are asking when we speak about language and the language that the Indus script encodes is not what was the universal language spoken by all the people at that time. We only talk about the language of administration that was encoded into this. For instance, today, our language, the language of our administration is Hindi and English. Okay, and though we have so many languages in India. So similarly, there was a language of administration there, and the language of administration was encoded into the script for common understanding, even by non-native speakers of that language, and therefore it had to be abstracted to a certain level and simplified to a certain level. So it is from these considerations that the script is worked out the way it is worked out. Yeah, was there a standardization? Was there a conventionalization? Yes. Did it achieve its logical conclusion and the expected end result? Probably no. It was abandoned just prior to its maximum maturity. Anything else?
Hi, Bhaskar. Simran here. I have a question.
Yes, Simran.
Bhaskar, so you talk when you talk about pictographic science, and you talk about Rebus principles also. So when you talk about pictographic science, what are the principles that are used to reach a certain interpretation? And you also spoke about evidences. If you can give an example of what kind of example.
For instance, that's why I showed the mountain sign. We took the mountain sign. We interpreted purely pictographically. We did not need any language for it, right? The hill sign, right?
Right.
You take this hill sign. We don't need language for it. We can, in any language, we can process it as hill, and we can also see that it was written more or less similarly in other scripts, starting with archaic Sumerian, where they did not have high hills. It's a land of the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. They did not have any high hills at all in that land. Hieroglyphic Egyptian, largely desert, low hills. But archaic to China and to India, The high hills are very well known. So you can see its representation or its conventionalization across scripts of that time and across various geographies of that time in a more or less similar fashion, which we then also see in later history from coins in the historical period, from the Mauryan period, from the Satavahana period, right down to the modern, the late Pandya period in Tamil Nadu, in the early Pandya period and Chola period in Tamil Nadu, and so on and so on. So we see them everywhere. So when you get a pictographic evidence like this, it is all right for us to look for its continuity with the necessary changes that are inevitable over time, that are natural over time. So it is all right for you to look at that continuity and say, look, all this can be traced right back to that one icon there. Like last time I spoke about the swastika and the people leaf, and so many other icons of the Indus Valley Civilization, which remain a common heritage to us even today. Not only to the Hindu religion, but also equally to the Buddhist and the Jain religions. That is the Protestant, quote unquote, the Protestant religions of India, as well as the Brahmanical religions of India. It remains a common symbolism right down the ages. And we can understand it for what it is, for that value. Okay?
Right. Thank you, Bhaskar.
Yeah. All right. So is that it then for today? So we can look for. I wasn't so conscious of time. Probably I should be more conscious of time. Next time I'll be more conscious and not spend things outside of the script and stick to the slides and tell the narrative so that we will cover more ground.
We have a few more questions, Bhaskar.
Yeah, we have a little under 8 minutes left. Yeah, we can take questions.
Okay, so one question is from Geeta. It says, is there any writings on metal artifacts at that time?
Yes, plenty. For instance, I showed. For instance, this is on metal. I mean, I can show you many more examples. For instance, here, this is on metal. This is on a stoneware bangle. See, it was a Bronze Age civilization. They produced hundreds and thousands of metal tablets with writing on them.
Okay, that's another question. It says, various scholars and other propose rebus linkage of Indus words with different languages like Tamil, Oriya, Kannada, etc. in their present form. Are such proposals valid?
This is a very interesting question. Okay. This is a very interesting question. Now I can work with the Dravidian hypothesis and then say, okay, Dravidian constitutes about 25 languages, and I could therefore take a word from any of these 25 languages and look for a rebus that occurs in Indus. Now, somebody else can say, no, this is not Dravidian language at all. This is Indo-Aryan language. Okay, in which case I could take a word from any of the Indo-Aryan languages, not only in India, but also from outside of India, all the way into Europe and beyond. From any of those languages, I can pull a word, and I can find the rebus there for Indo-Aryan. These are both valid methods, but a dangerous method. I think my one moment. Yeah, sorry, my earphones failed. So there is another method which is a dangerous method, which is there is the Aryan indigenist scholars in India who believe that what we call the Indo-Aryan language went out of India to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world speaks the language that we spoke here. And therefore, every Indian language is part of that. So for them, there is no difference between Dravidian and Indo-Aryan and all that stuff. Everything is one mother language, okay, called Sanskrit, and everything originates from there. And therefore, they will take a rebus from any language and put it into any other language. Okay, then hell breaks loose. You can do anything you want to do. You can have rich folk etymology, and you can have lots of good mythology and good fun, lots of controversy. If you're lucky, even television talk time, anchors will come after you. You'll be sought after. Yeah, all that. But that's a nightmare. That is the Aryan indigenous theory and their belief that everything belongs to Sanskrit. Okay, that all the linguistic heritage of India and the most of the rest of the world belongs to that linguistic heritage, can take a rebus from any language whatsoever. It doesn't matter to them, right? So mix it up any which way you want. That's what they do. And that is so, especially when you mention Oriya and Tamil. Oriya is understood to be an Indo-Aryan language. So, but many Indo-Aryan languages in India have a lot of Dravidian substratum. Chances are Oriya has a Dravidian substratum. In the heartlands of Orissa, there are Dravidian speakers such as Kuvi, Kuyi. In Chhattisgarh, there are Dravidian natives. So Oriya can have a substratum, howsoever buried it may be. It may have a substratum of Dravidian, as can Marathi, as can Gujarati, which are all thought to be Indo-Aryan languages. But to assume that everything is one language and therefore it's a free for all and I can take from anywhere and build anything out of anywhere is the work of the Aryan indigenous school, and they're very active not only in the academic circles, but also in the political circle and in much of what we do today. So countering the din of that argument becomes a difficult job. But one thing I would like to say about that is, it's all right. If it turns out to be true, well and good, then the debate is settled. We all can go and sleep, have a good sleep over it. And it doesn't matter which school, which language it was. But we are doing something else with this. We are cultivating a kind of a super cultural identity for Indians. A kind of a jingoism. So much so that most Indians grow up thinking they are culturally superior to the rest of the world. And that is a very dangerous thing. Our capital is, in India's present capital is labor. What we do best is export labor to the rest of the world. And we are considered good labor because we are friendly, we have no traces of extremism, we are reasonably well educated, we are hardworking, and so on and so forth. And to suddenly have a generation that comes next, which is completely opinionated and jingoistic about its identity, which believes in its cultural supremacy over the rest of the world, is a dangerous thing to do. And if that be the case, first talk to the Iraqis and the Iranians. Okay, much of Indian history, first of all, the way it is taught today, it should not be taught this way. It's a Delhi-centric history that we learn. It should be completely disbanded. It should be completely abandoned. As much as we read the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and stories and the history of the Mauryas, and we should read the stories of Gilgamesh the history of Asurbanipal. Our historical narratives should essentially include the Mesopotamian context. And without the Mesopotamian context, okay, our history cannot be understood at all. That is the crux of our, and it is so right through history, even in the Vedic times and the post-Vedic times. Okay, the exchange between India and Iran is a constant exchange for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Okay, long before these became even recognized languages, long before there were scripts, long before there was even settled agriculture or cities. Okay, Iran and the subcontinent were always in contact, both ways, from west to east and from east to west. Okay, there is an intersection between Iran and South Asia. Okay, that can never be discounted from any discussion. And whoever says whatever today, there is one incontrovertible fact: writing and literacy was invented in Mesopotamia, not Egypt, not China, not India, but Mesopotamia. And it is Mesopotamia that we had the closest relationships with in the Indus time and after, and we could say even to the present day, despite all the political turmoil that is consistently there in the post-independent period in the Northwest. Despite that, our connections are close. So it is linguistically unsound to latch on to rebus from any language, and it is culturally even more unsound, and it doesn't make any sense for us to get on to this. We all need to understand our heritage. We all need to understand it in its proportionate weightage. Okay, not as a chest thumping superior thing that we can go and tell the rest of the world with, saying that everything came from India. Okay, that's a whole lot of nonsense that we are cooking up, and this nonsense is what our next generation is likely to listen to, believe in, and grow up with. And there is a backlash on the Tamil side. On the Tamil side, they believe that the world's first monkey is a Tamil monkey. The mother of all languages is Tamil language. To them, even their brothers and sisters of the Kannada language and or the Telugu language, it doesn't mean anything to them. You know, so we are polarizing our society, okay, to construct a false unitary narrative that is likely to have long-term damage for knowledge and the youth of this world, and the youth that we produce as a labor force for the rest of the world, all over the world. You know, that is the danger of that approach. Take a rebus from anywhere and put it anywhere. I'm eating next to you on my plate, but if I like it from your plate, I'll take it, it's mine. Yep.
Thanks to SCR who has asked this question, and thanks Bhaskar for addressing it quite length and breadth to at least the cultural aspect of it and today what we are going through. And I think I wish if many people get to chance to watch this video, and if they don't have patience for watching the entire video, they do watch this section and this question, because at least we'll get some sense and the country will be in a better position.
Thank you for the suggestion, Abhijit.
We have another question coming from Geeta, and she asked, when you say Bronze Age, is it actually bronze, or is it the usage of the word bronze for Panchaloha?
See, this is a very long, it's an alloy age. Let me put it that way. Okay, we knew the technique of alloying. Okay, so we could mix copper and tin to produce something. We could mix, various metals in the desirable proportions. The Bronze Age is distinct from the Iron Age. There is no iron found in any of the Indus cities. Okay, the Iron Age comes later. We refer to it as the Bronze Age because it is not just copper, or it is not tin, or it is not brass, or it is not, but Panchaloha as a standard. We'll have to look at metallurgical history when it was standardized as a mix of 5 metals. I do not know. I will investigate this for the when we cover this subject. When we will cover, I will cover it at the time. I'll have to brush up my reading a little bit. You see, this when we come to the archaeometric aspects of it, we will touch upon the metallurgical aspects of it as well, and then we will try and understand it in depth. But it is unlikely that that we know of any Panchaloha or a 5 metal composition from the Indus Age. Though I may be wrong.
I think we have no more questions in YouTube or chat, and almost time also, and
it's over 7 minutes over time. So thank you very much for staying through, asking all the questions, getting involved, getting interested. On my part, I think I failed you a little bit by not being able to cover 2 subjects. I shall promise to make good for this in the next session. Thank you very much. All of you, I think you may have taken, of course, Abhijit and Aishwarya have been doing an excellent job. All the questions come to me and I answer them. But if you do feel like writing to me directly with any questions or anything that you have, or for any reading material that you would like me to suggest and stuff like that, please feel free, and you can see my email address on the screen there. Thank you.
Just an information before we end is that the PowerPoint, both of the first and the second talk, Bhaskar said that he will share. So it'll be put up into the YouTube site. It'll also be there in the Center for Law site for people to download at leisure, so that you can go through the PowerPoint as you're hearing the lecture.
Yeah, I shall. I just need to do in some places. I think I've missed the credits for pictures and stuff like that. Let me put it and share both of it in the next 1 hour or so.
We also invite people to write to us in terms of other issues, other questions, other topics that interest you.
See, if there is a question bank that you would like to accumulate, regardless of the schedule of this talk, you can keep that as an ongoing activity and keep giving it to me. If there are questions which will be naturally covered within the scope of this series of talks, I will say that it will be covered. I will answer it straight away, or it will be covered in session 3 or session 4 or session 5. Or if it is outside the scope, I will say it is outside the scope completely. Or if it is within my means to suggest some other material that they can read and follow in lieu of the question that they ask, which I do not have a direct answer to, then I can refer to them as well. So yeah, I welcome questions and a question bank, regardless of people appearing for this talk. It could even come from people that do not actually come for this, or from people who intend to see this later, but they could send in their question and they can see it later.
So anyway, with that, we'll wind up this talk, Bhaskar.
Yes. Thank you very much, Suresh and Aishwarya and Abhijit, as usual, for the excellent backup for this. And thanks everybody for staying through. I don't know how many people are there really, because I'm only seeing people in Zoom. I don't know how many people out there are in YouTube. So I'm not seeing that audience. Thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated. And I hope you got something out of this. And
just reminding everybody, the next talk will be on the 30th of October, Friday evening at 6 o'clock. We will, like today, be sending you the third poster for the third talk. Yeah. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.